What's up, y'all, and welcome back to another episode of my podcast, Failing Forward. If you're new, welcome. I hope you think about subscribing after listening to this. If you're a returner, you already know what it is. Don't forget to like this episode, and I hope you enjoy. I'm super excited to be shooting today, y'all. This is the first episode in a new crib. I got a totally new setup, and I'm just ready to get right into it. I got a lot to share with y'all today about Invest Fest, how we're progressing with the pregnancy, and everything that's been happening since the last podcast. So I'll go ahead and get right into that at the end of the episode. But for the sake of today's topic, I really just want to jump right in. It's been long enough, so let's get into it.
You know, sometimes it's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel because so many things that go against us. But it's something inside our spirit that just keep us marching forward. We gon' be alright. We gon' be alright.
What I want to speak to y'all about today is something crucial because life is far too short and many of us have worked way too hard to get where we are just for our peace of mind to be compromised. I know I speak for many when I say it's a terrible feeling when you dedicate yourself to a craft and after enough consistency, you begin to see your efforts bearing fruit. But you can't even fully enjoy it because other people feel entitled to your time, space, assets, and even the level of privilege your hard work has afforded you. And for whatever reasons, you feel this obligation to reach back and help your people or to do things that make others happy, even if it comes at an inconvenience to you. And I've been there before, and I still struggle with this because sometimes you feel like you owe people that have been a part of your journey or who were around for your come up, not necessarily helping per se, but just there, somewhere in the background, somehow connected to your path. Maybe they were family, maybe it was a friend, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter who they were because we can't let anyone or anything get in the way of our path towards success. So it doesn't matter how old you are, how many times you said yes when you really wanted to say no, or how many mistakes you've made up until this point in your life. Right now, in this present moment, the most important thing for you to realize is that you have a choice. And you've always have, but in the past, maybe you didn't quite realize the power of your voice or the equanimity that comes with deciding to choose yourself first. But after today, maybe you will. So with that said, today we're going to be talking about the importance of setting boundaries and how you can begin to develop a sense of trust in your ability to take control of your life by becoming your own biggest advocate. Now, to some, the word advocate is not something that you hear every day, but I can promise you that after this podcast, it'll become way too hard to forget. So before we get too deep, I really want to put y'all into the frame of mind I was in when I got the inspiration for today's talk. I love pulling directly from personal experiences because I tend to have a hard time speaking on things I've never actually gone through. So I say all of that to say something I've noticed the deeper I've gotten into my 20s is this unreasonable yet generational dynamic that's continued to take shape within the Black community. And I don't even know if I would say it's something that's worsened with time, but for what I'm currently seeing in my environment, I could definitely say it's become pretty shameful. And I say that because many of the behaviors and tactics I'm seeing being used to manipulate, exploit, and extract things from situations are being demonstrated directly by the elders of our families, starting with the matriarchs and the patriarchs on down. And whenever you see this type of behavior being displayed, it honestly makes you wonder, what is it that occurred in the past that prompted them to carry themselves in this way? And in many instances, we'll never get the answer to those questions or be able to convince them to change. But the reality of it is many of my peers are suffering because of it, or they feel this inherent weight on their shoulders because they feel like it's their responsibility to carry the family forward. And while some of us may make it look easy, the truth of the matter is it's extremely hard, especially if you're someone who is the first of anything for your family, whether that being the firstborn child, meaning you're the oldest, the first to go to college, or the first to become a millionaire. Inevitably, you will have your set of challenges. And unfortunately, a lot of the experiences you face will be unique to you because you're charting out an individual path. So if you happen to come from a lineage impacted by trauma or poverty, that only further complicates this process because there will be so much stuff for you to unpack on your journey before you can really start to put the pieces together of your life. And I may be wrong about this, but I think part of the reason why we haven't really started to see a shift in things up until now is due to generational norms within the community. For example, for most of y'all who are frequent watchers of the podcast, you would know that I was primarily raised in a West African household. And not only are we West African, but we're also Christian. And in our culture, which is probably not too different from yours, I would assume, it's customary for children to obey their parents. But It's also believed that children must return home to take care of their parents after they've gone into mass success in the material world. The Bible literally says, honor your father and your mother that your days may be long in the land that your Lord God is giving you. That's basically saying, listen to your father and your mother and you'll be granted a long life in addition to other riches that God has promised you. And with that said, you can only imagine the ways in which people can manipulate those ideas to make use of their children. But going back to the larger point I was trying to make, whenever you think of the word culture, in the same breath, you should think of the word tradition, because it's the traditions of a specific group that attribute to what is culture. Now, when you think of African culture, which is made up of traditions that date back centuries, one would instantly assume that because of the longevity of what's been passed down, there must have been some level of agreement in these teachings, thus justifying the validity of them. Unless you're in some sort of dictatorship, but for this example, let's say that's not what's happening. So because these beliefs date back so long that your grandma's grandma used them, what happens when those beliefs no longer fit into what you see for yourself, or what makes you feel comfortable, safe, stable, and at peace? Do you stay quiet and take a blind eye? Do you fall in line and abide by the system? Or do you take the risk of doing what's best for you, even if it means going against the traditional way? These are the questions it's important to ask yourself, but unfortunately, many of us don't take the time to for a variety of reasons. One of them being that we love and revere the idea of family. It's one of the things that we place on a pedestal because without it, many of us would be forced to navigate the world alone. And let's be honest, nobody wants to be alone. Nobody wants to feel judged, misunderstood, or to experience conflict with their loved ones. It's not fun, it's never easy, and no one wins when the family feuds. So the easiest thing to do in most cases is to suffer in silence, because a lot of people don't have the language to express their dissatisfaction in ways that aren't seen as offensive or disrespectful. Or they simply lack the confidence and self-esteem needed to stand up for what they believe in. And unfortunately, this is how the cycle continues, because a lot of times the power players in our lives abuse tradition in order to justify the conditions in which they treat you. And in a lot of cases, it comes in the form of harsh discipline, unfair treatment, and emotionally charged statements they use to dismiss your beliefs and reaffirm their position in your life. And this is why the statement, boundaries are for you, is so true, because only you know what you're willing or not willing to tolerate. No one knows your personal threshold better than you. Because if you leave it up to the average person, authority figure, or anyone you care about for that matter to determine how to treat you, they will see no bounds. And it's honestly sad how often this happens to young people. And I use the word young sparingly because I believe this information can apply to people of all ages and positions in life. Right now, I'm just merely painting a picture of what I've been seeing in my environment lately. But a lot of times it simply boils down to the fact that a lot of elders feel as if we haven't seen anything or lived long enough to define our character through the experience of a hardship. So, of course, there's a lack of respect when we say that we're tired or we need a mental health day, because what do we know about being tired, or how could we know what's best for us? The audacity of these damn millennials. I'm sure that's what they're saying somewhere. But no, on a serious note, I'm not saying that people should just be able to do and say whatever they want at all times. That isn't what boundaries are about. But I do think people are entitled to some level of autonomy in their lives, especially when you're of a certain age or position in life, because it's not natural for every move you make to be predicated on someone else's approval or scrutiny for not living up to their ideals. That's actually a recipe for disaster, because there is a difference between being suggestive and being controlling. There is a difference between being firm and being overbearing. There is a difference between expressing an opinion and being judgmental. And there is a difference between experiencing gratitude and entitlement. Relationships are a two-way street. There almost always has to be a level of reciprocity present for the good ones to last. It's almost as if you're negotiating a deal. There will always be give and take, but if the goal is for all parties to at the least walk away feeling heard and understood, then it takes an equal commitment to listening, learning, and a willingness to understand another person's experience, regardless of their position in life. Because looking at the bigger picture of things, if this is how we're raising children from the time that they're young, when are we expecting them to become fully able and confident adults? The kind of people who are assured of themselves and their belief system, those capable of asserting their values onto their environment with ease and integrity, people who stand up for themselves in the face of adversity, people who are self-aware. If they can't practice those habits at home with the people that they love, what do you think they're learning from you about how to handle conflict or respond to difficulty in life? Is it that every disagreement has to turn into an altercation, that their thoughts don't matter, that they should play it safe in situations regardless of how they feel, to compromise their well-being for the betterment of other people? Oh, lastly, that they should call you or get a pass before making every major decision in their lives. These are the hidden messages behind a lot of the behavior and rhetoric aimed toward young people. And because there aren't many forums available to have these sorts of conversations, it often results in emotionally immature adults. And I'm not saying that in a bad way, y'all, because I've had to do my share of learning on the subject. But if you're a person who has trouble expressing yourself truthfully and showing up authentically on a consistent basis, then you probably need some work in this regard. And that's okay. That's what this space is for. We're literally failing forward. But now that I've prefaced the conversation, I can finally speak to y'all about how boundary setting looks in real time and how you can begin to implement this in your life with hopes that they want more space to think, prioritize yourself, and work toward becoming the best version of you. So if I had to define personal boundaries, I would describe them as the lines you draw in the sand that dictate how you would like to engage with the world around you. And this is important because not only do boundaries help you to protect your peace, but they also allow you to set parameters on how you would like to both experience and situate essential domains of your life. And this is dope because once you realize this, it's almost as if you decoded the matrix, because your life will almost instantly improve. Now, if you're not used to setting boundaries, you may have to adjust to the feeling of disappointing people who are used to a certain version of you. But once you get past any shame or guilt you feel internally, I promise you that eventually those feelings will subside, and they'll later be replaced with feelings of gratitude and appreciation for this newfound space you're in. Because whether we like it or not, there isn't an area of our lives where boundaries don't apply. So whenever you don't honor what you need to feel comfortable or safe in any situation, you're literally betraying yourself, and it's taking years off your life. So it's actually in our best interest to start thinking about how we could do a better job at censoring ourselves from unwanted interactions, physical contact, or invasions of our privacy and personal space. And you'll begin to notice that once you start to honor your personal thresholds, the people in your life will begin to drop like flies, because certain individuals will no longer be able to recognize you or relate to you. But the good part about this process is it'll begin to show you who really cares by the way they stand firm and showing up for you. And I think that that's something that we all deserve, because boundaries aren't really about laying down a hammer and becoming an enforcer. I mean, it can be that in certain instances, but I think the true essence of this process lies in your ability to effectively find ways to communicate your needs to better advocate for yourself. Oftentimes, when people hear words such as boundaries or advocacy, they seem so strong in nature, almost so strong that it scares folks, because they feel as if they aren't assertive or outspoken enough to uphold boundaries. But the truth of the matter is, boundaries aren't limited to a specific personality type. It's more about having the will and courage to actually set them, and how that looks is completely up to you. You may have to write a letter, send an email, or a text explaining how you feel, and maybe that'll be the catalyst for a larger conversation. But either way, it's all a part of your journey of creating healthier interactions or touch points between you and this person or entity. So yeah, you might know a person who is more bold, self-confident, and they're not afraid to take up space. So you might assume that this process just comes natural to them. But there are also introverted, mild-mannered folks that don't care to be seen or heard, that are out here upholding their boundaries. So what's stopping you? I'm not saying that it's easy, but it's definitely essential, because all of those repressed thoughts, feelings, and emotions have to live somewhere. So the more you suppress those urges, the more likely you are to harbor resentment internally, which will eventually lead to some form of a blow up across one of the core areas of your life. So please be mindful. But on a more positive note, once you get into the habit of expressing your boundaries and having them met wholesomely, it'll actually want to make you become more cognizant in your dealings with others if you weren't already, because you'll notice that just by taking an extra step to think about how your behavior may impose upon someone else, you're already demonstrating the qualities of someone who is socially aware. And that alone will have you operating amongst elite company. So I know I focused a lot of the early parts of this conversations on our dealings with family, primarily when it comes to navigating the relationships we have with our parents. And that was intentional, because initially, the reason I started this podcast was to be of service to those navigating their 20-somethings. And I did this not in an effort to exclude anybody, but because at the time I got started, I was in my early 20s and I had a lot of questions. And from the conversations I would have with my peers, it seemed like many of them did too. It wasn't until midway on this journey where I realized that these subjects have the ability to impact people of all stages and walks of life. And for that, I'm grateful, because I always envisioned this space being a kind where people could come to regardless of their situation, with no shame, but a burning desire to feel seen, heard, and safe enough to work toward their breakthrough. So when you hear that passion coming through on certain topics, it's not because I just enjoy taking jabs at the elders. It's actually because I care, and I genuinely want the best for those who want the best for themselves. And I've always been this way since I was a little kid. I remember being young, not even a teenager. And I always had this sense of bravery and courage about myself. And it would often lead to trouble because at the time, I didn't know how to manage it. But I promise you, if my grandma was alive right now, she would tell you that as a child, I will often be seen as the voice of reason, always rationalizing things and politicking for myself or other people. And because I was so good at it, a lot of times I would forget that I was actually talking to my grandmother. So there would actually be moments where I would challenge her, not in an effort to be disrespectful, but more so to stand up for what I believed in or what I thought was right. Because at the early age of 10, I already understood a lot of the things that we're speaking about right now. I already knew what it meant to feel safe and to truly cherish your safety because of my experience befriending trauma. I already knew or had an idea of how I was supposed to feel within the constraints of certain environments. And maybe it's because I grew up alongside 3 of my aunts and I would talk to them about their experiences. And even if I didn't have the maturity to fully grasp the nature of what they were expressing, I could always sense the emotion that was attached to their speech. And once I felt that, I would always get this bodily urge to advocate or stand up for people, sometimes not even knowing what I was advocating for. And maybe I overstepped my boundaries a few times, but I just remember my grandma pausing often, almost in a state of shock, confused that a child had this much sense. And she would say, well, the Bible does say out of the mouth of babes. And sometimes she would laugh in disbelief or say, you know what, Monty, because my grandma would call me Monty, you're right. And I would always feel this sense of pride on the inside. That was before I got older and I started to get smacked and kicked out of the house, which is neither here nor there. But I'm saying all of that to say I've actually put skin in the game to be able to rap with y'all about some of the topics I'm relaying. So just know when I speak, I'm always pulling from a real place. There's no fluff here. And if you're interested in hearing the rest of the verse, it's out of the book of Psalms, chapter 8, verse 2. And in this version, it says, from the lips of babes and infants you have established strength, because of your adversaries, that you might silence the enemy and the avenger. And how I interpreted this verse was, there will be times where noble men and women will have to rely upon the strength of children to adequately respond in the face of adversity. And as crazy as it may sound on the surface, I believe this was God's way of leveling the playing field and displaying that you can learn and draw support from anyone, even a child. So in the words of the infamous Kanye West, listen to the kids, bro. But moving along, I want to share some tips that I've gathered along my journey that I felt could be useful in helping y'all to kick things off. Let's get into it. The first thing I would suggest for anyone struggling to set boundaries is to get to the root of your fear. And I say this because some of the biggest breakthroughs take place in our minds first, beginning with how we interpret our experiences, how they make us feel, and more importantly, what we go on to believe is possible. There's a quote from Brene Brown that says, be careful of the story you're telling yourself. And this is crucial because when you look back on your life, it's inevitable that there will be experiences that ultimately surpass our level of understanding. And maybe these experiences left you angry. Maybe they brought you pain. And because you never received the kind of closure needed to move forward, you now question the caliber of your strength and sensibility. And this is where you could really see fear manifest itself in the form of self-doubt, self-judgment, and even self-hatred, where limited beliefs can cause you to feel as though you don't deserve good things, people, or experiences. But if you look deep enough, you'll find it that at the root of these sentiments is fear. Not the truth of your circumstance, but the fear of what if or what could be. And I don't know about y'all, but I couldn't live comfortably with that level of uncertainty. So if you're listening to this and you identify with this message, I want to ask you, what is the trade-off for your peace of mind? And I'm not talking about the satisfaction of knowing that you chose the easiest way out. That's not peace. I might go as far to say that's delusion. What I'm talking about is that Tim's peace, the kind you can't buy because it only comes from doing right by you. So I want to encourage y'all in saying that a healthy level of conflict is completely natural, and there's actually a lot you can learn about yourself through navigating these situations as you're confronted with them, because it's not always about getting it right the first time, but more so making a concerted effort to learn from your mistakes and do better at your next encounter. So don't worry about the what ifs. Trust your decisions and find comfort in knowing that you did right by you when it mattered the most. Say no to fear and fail forward. We will never know until we try. Secondly, I would say, think about what you want in the end. And this step is simple, but a lot of times we overcomplicate it by prioritizing anything but ourselves and what we need to be fulfilled. So when I say think about what you want in the end, I mean, if your life was a beach and you were tasked with thinking about the ideal circumstance for this domain, what exactly would that entail? This could include the texture of the water, quality of the sand, nature of the ambiance, your preferred style of scenery, and any ground rules you would like to set for who is or isn't permitted in this space. And I know this is just a silly analogy, but your life could literally be just that. Because I think it's important to dream fearlessly without limitations and to be as specific as possible about every single detail of what you would like to achieve. Even if the only thing you're aspiring for is peace. No matter the case, it's paramount for us to understand that for every vision or inkling we have about how we would like certain realms of our lives to be, we must also understand the expectation of what that will require of us. And this is good because not only does it keep us grounded, but it also allows for practical or sometimes not so practical decision making along the journey. So if you're a person who takes pride in your resilience, I will hope that you aren't deterred by the resistance along the journey, because it comes with the territory of working toward anything great. And you were born to be great, so try to embrace it. And I'll give you a quick example of this playing out before moving on to the next point. If your dream is to move far away from your hometown, to build a new life or establish a career for yourself and your future family, you may have to set boundaries regarding your time to honor your commitment to yourself. You may have to set boundaries regarding your finances to honor your commitment to yourself. You may have to set boundaries safeguarding your mind to honor your commitment to yourself. And only you would know what specific steps will be needed to accomplish this, but a boundary you might set in relation to time may be letting your friends and family know what hours you're available to speak or link up during the week, whether that be on the phone or in person. And while this may sound easy, going forward, the real challenge will be getting them to understand that you may not be as free as you once were, causing some people to look at you strange, saying you changed, like you worked this hard to stay the same. But if you don't set boundaries around your time, how will you ever be able to get anything done? And the reality of things is the average person is going to be in the same place doing the same things when you get back. So why not choose you? Anybody that really cares about you won't try to intentionally overstep your boundaries or get upset at a change you make for yourself that really only impacts you. If anything, they'll want what's best for you. So if managing your time better is included in that, so be it. A boundary you might set in relation to your finances may be simplifying your diet and choosing to cook instead of eating out, cutting back on unnecessary subscriptions to streaming services, and not spending frivolously each time you get some extra bread in your pocket. So you might have to turn down that Renaissance tour ticket. You might have to miss out on the latest denim tears drop. And you may even have to say no a little more than usual, which might get a little uncomfortable, but it'll actually open your eyes to what relationships and habits you have that actually align with your trajectory. So of course, dream big, think large, and shoot for the stars. But at the same time, try to think practically about the steps in between that'll lay the foundation for the things you see in your future. And while those habits may seem challenging to acquire, I could promise you that they're worth it, because what you don't want to happen is you developing a negative attitude towards your loved ones or becoming complacent in your situation. So just trust that as long as you're willing and ready to do the work, everything will literally fall into place in the end. The next point I'll make is that transparent communication is key. And the reason I put a caveat in front of this statement is because typically we hear that communication itself is key. And while that may be true to an extent, there are indeed levels and modes of communicating. So as funny as it seems, if you tell a lie or fabricate a story, you are still communicating. If you're somebody that likes to pass blame and deflect during disagreements, you are still communicating. If you expect people to pick up on nonverbal cues because they should just know already, you are still communicating. Maybe not in a way that's optimal, but you're saying something. So if you seek to create more healthy and genuine connections, being able to communicate honestly, openly, and effectively are your main keys to success. So what does this look like in real time? First and foremost, I would say you have to reach some level of vulnerability for things to change. And I know that this could be a challenge for some people because vulnerability involves trust. But transparency is all about being able to show up as your most authentic self. So this is where your discernment will really have to kick in, because, of course, we can't achieve this level of intimacy with everybody. But if you're in a relationship or in close ties with family and friends, I will hope that there are spaces available where you feel as though it's safe enough to live in your truth, because vulnerability can be the catalyst that unlocks relationships. And the reason for this is oftentimes people don't know how to support you because we haven't ever allowed them to. Or maybe a person doesn't know your expectations for how you would like to be treated because you haven't ever given them any parameters around what it takes to be in close quarters with you. So in places and with people you deem as safe and beneficial for your long-term growth or healing, please share yourself with them. And even if you don't have those kind of forces in your life right now, sometimes we literally have to kick the door down and create them. So don't be afraid to ask for what you need. Sometimes we literally have to sit our loved ones down and ask them to really hear us out. And if you're unsure of how to do this, I would suggest that you preface the conversation by saying, so and so, I would really love it if you could just listen right now. I want to open up and share what's been on my mind, but in order for this conversation to go how I envision, I would really appreciate it if we both gave one another the opportunity not only to listen, but to share. I won't interrupt while you speak, and it would mean a lot if you could do the same. Bada boom, bada bang. So never feel like you got to be agreeable for the sake of keeping the peace. There's always a way to communicate your needs. We just got to find a ways to do it meaningfully, respectfully, and authentically. So when it comes to these sorts of conversations, I would always encourage you to start off small and then build out bigger. Begin with smaller opportunities, such as picking what you would like to eat whenever asked, or whenever a friend asks if you like their latest song. Whenever you're tasked with one of these situations and you have that moment where you're likely to freeze up and go into people pleasing, just know that it doesn't make you difficult or hard to deal with for disagreeing. No one will penalize you for vocalizing your opinion. And lastly, the right people won't leave. And if they do, you just might have to deal with that. But at the end of the day, it says more about them than it does you, because if they asked for your opinion, then got upset after hearing your version of the truth, it doesn't sound like they were really looking for your opinion, but more the confirmation that whatever they did was accepted through your validation. And that's not what we're here for. We aren't seeking to become enablers. That's what we're looking to outgrow. So I believe it's important to always say what you mean and to mean what you say, because the weight you've probably felt internally for past times where you may have betrayed yourself, being too afraid to go against the grain, it'll slowly begin to go away. Each time you live more in your truth, you'll get this feeling of relief and feel lighter on your feet. So always speak your piece honestly and respectfully. And I know you may not directly correlate this with expressing personal boundaries, but this practice is actually one of those foundational pieces to the puzzle, because it teaches you how to create a sense of safety in your environment through the practice of sharing intimate truths. By doing this and having to navigate the many different personalities and situations, no matter how big and no matter how small, it'll soon give you the confidence to tackle more and more challenging conversations as you master the little ones. So before jumping into the deep end of expressing personal boundaries, we can start off small, using these tactics to create more transparency in our lives. And you may not have even realized it, but I just gave y'all 3-in-1 combo under transparency. You may have to go back and watch it, but we said transparency is key. Don't be afraid to ask for what you need, and never feel like you have to be agreeable for the sake of keeping the peace. There's always a way to communicate, even if the answer is to leave. Mr. or Mrs. Transparent version of you could literally say, well, you're not respecting my boundaries after I've repeatedly expressed them to you, so I'm going to remove myself. And you keep it pushing and live to fight another day. But the most important thing is that you can go to sleep at night knowing that you took care of yourself, and sometimes that's all that matters. But now that we've covered boundaries more generally, I do want to give y'all a couple things to think about when upholding them with parents, since that was a majority of the focus in the early part of this conversation. So first things first, whenever you're speaking to your parents or any authority figure in your life, it's important to be clear, concise, and straightforward. More than anything, you want them to understand you. So you might want to steer clear of accusatory statements or anything that could come across like a personal attack. Instead, you want to use I statements to talk about how you feel or to express what you need. This way, nothing gets lost in translation, and I will hope that your parents feel as though they could partner with you on this process. So going back to something I said earlier about sending a text or an email, if you're the type of person who needs to write things down before speaking, please do so to help yourself out when you're in the midst of this situation. You could literally say, I wrote something down. Do you mind if I read it to you? That's literally transparent communication. It's that simple. That way you don't forget anything and you feel confident expressing yourself to the best of your ability. But even more importantly, you have to be self-assured in what you're saying, because if you're not, it will come across while you're speaking. They are your parents. 9 times out of 10, they know you and your tendencies. So really take your time with your reflection and make sure your approach is calculated. It'll heighten your likelihood for success in these interactions. Secondly, realize that your parents are people too. So it's important to be firm in your stance while still striking a healthy balance of compassion. And I know it could be hard to extend understanding to others when you've been hurt or betrayed, but at the end of the day, your goal isn't to make people feel what you feel. It's to get people to understand what you feel. So in order to accomplish this, you have to be willing to give in order to receive. In my personal experience, I feel like I've learned that most of our parents aren't necessarily bad people. Instead, they're just people with life experiences who feel the need to protect us from some of the things that they may have gone through. And at times, this could come across in the form of harsh limits or seeking to control aspects of our lives. But at the end of the day, it's important to at the least try to understand where they're coming from, even if it's just for you. Because once I understood this, it made my life so much easier because I was able to extend compassion to my loved ones and move with love as opposed to shutting them out or feeling like they're in opposition. So earlier, I said to be respectful. And I don't know if I emphasize this enough, but this is probably rule number one, especially when you're dealing with your parents. So always be sure to give good eye contact, use good posture, listen, manage your tone, and be open to the many directions that the conversation could go. Over time, the more that you practice this, your parents should be able to see the maturity in you. And because of that, I would like to believe that any good parent will want to nurture that and foster you in that direction. With that said, it's important to be grateful. At the end of the day, I would like to believe that most parents really mean well and at the core have a deep desire to help us. And I know that there are many bad parents out there, but I'm gearing this conversation mostly toward parents who actively try to do right. So as I said, be grateful for what you see them trying to do. It's as easy as saying, I really appreciate your advice. I can tell that you care. I would just like to experience this opportunity on my own with your support. You did a great job raising me. Now it's time to trust that I'll make good decisions with everything that you gave me. And as a parent, how could you hear that and push back? That sounds like something spoken from a knowledgeable, respectful, and mature young adult. You literally have to listen to that. But if they don't, because people are different and it also takes time to build habits, get comfortable re-emphasizing your boundaries. Some people call it the broken record technique, where you refuse to argue, talk in circles, or go in tangents. After you've expressed yourself, you continue to repeat your needs clearly and consistently for however long you need to. And I'll give you a quick example of this. So out of my mother's children, I am the first to go to college. So when I would call her, she would often want to make comments and remarks about my siblings following in my path because, of course, she would like them to be successful. So my mom's intentions weren't to be negative, but when I would hear it, that's how it would land in my ear. So over time, I had to get comfortable telling my Mom, I didn't call you to talk in depth about my siblings and their lives. Everybody's an adult, and I think with time, they will find their way. There's nothing I could really do about it. So when I call you, I would like to keep things light and positive. I don't want to talk about them. I want to talk about what me and you have going on. And my mom respected it. And whenever she would find herself going down that wormhole, I would say, Mom, I thought we talked about that already. Can we move on to a different subject? And because she respects my boundaries, we won't continue down that path. So don't be afraid to reemphasize your needs. But I will say, I know that not everybody has that type of relationship with their parents. So take this advice with a grain of salt. But I know in my situation, I'm really grateful that me and my mom had the type of bond where it's give and take. Like I could tell her my point of view. She listens and internalizes it and receives it. And, we work together. So I would say just remember that it's your story and you sticking to it, period. Lastly, I would encourage you to know your limits. As I just stated, sometimes you have to know when to move on from people, conversations, interactions, and opportunities. Whatever it is, you have to know what it is that you could take. So if you find yourself constantly coming to the point of a near breakdown or pouring from an empty cup, then you know that it's time to go. And I know I suggested these tips for dealing with parents, but honestly, these tips could be applied to any situation and with anybody because life is already hard enough. Nobody has time to be dealing with that type of toxic energy in their lives, and that goes for anybody. So if it just happens to be a parent, then you got to do what you got to do because there's a point in life where the theories of change just don't work, where you've tried everything in the book and nothing works. You've given chance after chance only to be disappointed. So at that point, only you know how much you could take realistically. If you've done all that you could do, sometimes you have to accept the things that you cannot change and peacefully remove yourself from certain environments. And it doesn't matter what a person did for you in the past. If the return on their investment is making you feel less than or negative on the inside, then it obviously isn't worth it. So just because they brought you into the world, that doesn't give them the right to take you out because that is what stress will do to you. That's what anxiety will do to you. That's what resentment will do to you. That's what envy and jealousy will do to you. That's what harboring hurt will do to you. It will kill you if you let it. So sometimes you have to cut people off, even a parent, because if that's what's necessary for your well-being, you have to do it. It's important to protect your mind, body, and soul. You want to make sure that these things are aligned at all times. So if one of those rooms is off, everything else is going to be off. There's no in between. So do right by you and do whatever you have to keep the drama and trouble out of your life. Those are the types of situations you want to avoid, because when people are off mentally, you have to understand that they live in that state and they get satisfaction from trying to pull you in there with them. So don't be afraid to let go. And just know that boundaries can change. None of this stuff is static. So there's no need to be afraid. But if there is a dynamic that you want to improve, just know that it might require something differently from you. So if you're dealing with any of this, of course, I always encourage seeking out professional help. But you could also build out habits that help you personally throughout this process. So I hope this helps. And if you care to hear a recap on InvestFest and get an update on the pregnancy, feel free to keep listening. But if you're going, be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a review on whatever streaming platform you're listening from. I deeply appreciate it, and I want y'all to know it goes a long way. Now, to get into the InvestFest recap, InvestFest was so fire, y'all. If y'all could see my shirt, it says Black Women Are Superheroes, and I also have this bracelet from Black is Love Co. It says Black is Love, gray and gold. But I just love that brand. For one, I love the designs. I love the ideation around it. I love the colorways. I'm big on earth tones, so if you see me, it's going to be a lot of grays, a lot of sandy colors, a lot of brown, a lot of green, a lot of cream and off-white. Those are my colors. So when I was looking at the brand, it was just all of that. And it uplifts black people, so it just naturally aligns. So it was just fire to be able to run into them and support the brand. I got this shirt, and then I got a bag that ended up being wavy for my next outfit the next day. So that was fire. But the first day, my little brother and I, we went to the vendor marketplace, and they had hundreds of black-owned brands. You name it, from cosmetics to clothing to holistic wellness remedies. They had so many things. They covered all of the bases. And honestly, I could say that was my favorite part of the weekend, because not only did I get to network with some of my favorite content creators and influencers, but I also was just able to get inspired and see people taking risks that I plan to take soon. Like, it's hard to start a business. It's hard to become an entrepreneur, and to see these people out pitching their business, whether they're getting sales or not, it's a good experience because you learn new habits. For myself, I had to work on my 30-second pitch because I was with my little brother. He's just walking up to people asking them what you do. So of course, if they give their whole spill, they're going to expect you to do the same. So what do you do? So I had to introduce myself. My name is Montay. I have a podcast called Failing Forward with Montay. We seek to encourage people to embrace failure on the road to success. A lot of people, they share their victories and wins, but oftentimes we don't know what they had to do to get there. So on my podcast, I try to use my background in mental health to facilitate authentic conversations to tell the kids, but also anybody, that failure is okay and it's also a natural part of the journey. That was my pitch, something along the lines of that. And I had to work on that because I was doing it on the fly. I didn't work on it before I got there. So it was just little things like that. I met This Is Nikki's, I met The Real Taz, I met Finesse's Only, B. Simone, and her co-host on the Know For Sure podcast. And I met so many more people, him 500, Nehemiah Davis, and people that I don't even naturally listen to. But it's funny because I'm more into the mental health, self-care, wellness aspect of things. And my little brother is more on the credit repair, real estate, life insurance side of things. So the influencers that we were seeing and noticing, we literally were just so different in our taste and like what we go for. So I would see people like This Is Nikki's, or I would see people like B. Simone or The Real Taz, or whoever it was. And he would see people like him 500, Nehemiah Davis, and so many other people, DS Boone. And I ain't have a clue who they were, but it was just a great experience to be able to really immerse ourselves in one another's worlds. As far as the speaker sessions, we went to a lot of different things. We went to a mental health talk with David Banner. That was one of my favorite ones. A lot of the information I pretty much already knew and have talked about on the podcast, but it was just good to continue to be able to provide that information to our people. When I heard them talk about epigenetics, I really got excited about that, because these are things that people really need to know about, and it's real. It's not like they just making it up. So it was dope to hear them talk about the ways that we can continue to prioritize wellness and self-care in our community. Outside of that, I loved hearing Robert Smith. I loved hearing a guy called Humble. I'd never heard of him before, but he was a wealth manager. I forget for who, but I know he works with celebrities and athletes, I believe. And he just was dropping gems. He was saying that if you're somebody that, wants to become successful, you have to embrace a lot of crap. and it was an acronym that stand for criticism. What did the R stand for? I don't remember. A stood for assholes, and P stood for, I forget. I probably got to go back in my notes and look for that. But just the acronym, and he was just so sharp with everything that he was saying. It was so on point. And it's crazy that he was up there with Lonzo Ball and Maverick Carter. And for him to be the least well known, at least in my experience, he was dropping the most gems. So I definitely had to follow Humble. If you go in my followers, my recent followers, you could definitely see him in there. I think his ad is humble dot. And he was dropping gems, man. Outside of that, Diddy was dope. It was what I was expecting. A lot of black empowerment, telling his story. And it was a great experience overall. I would say one of my favorites out of the whole weekend was on day 3. Who was it? I forget exactly who it was, but I just know I got a lot of value out of hearing Robert Smith. I really wasn't expecting that. And I don't know why, with him being the richest black person in the world, but I thought that it was going to be like a lot of fluff. I didn't think he was really going to be like really talking to us in a meaningful way. Because a lot of times when people reach that level, it's hard to gauge authenticity. So I think hearing him and Steve Harvey, that was just like the icing on the cake for me. That was a great talk. I took so much away from it. And I would say the common thing that I heard from all of these extremely successful people was the importance of habits. What you do day in and day out, that's going to be the determinant of what you're going to be in this world. So who you hanging with, what you putting into your body, what you putting into your mind, how are you feeding your soul, all of those components to living a healthy life that we don't necessarily consider on the road to success, it all works together. So that was mostly what I took away from all of those people. One of the great opportunities that I got, and I'm actually praying that something comes from this, is that I met Milano. She runs a brand called Milano D Rose. I always mess up my pronunciation of this brand, but it's a Philly-based brand. I watched her whole come up. She had a store right around the corner from my high school, and to see her from that point into what she is now, a multi-millionaire female boss, like, she is killing it. So when I saw her, my little brother was doing my camera work. I had to get that moment recorded. So that was an extremely dope moment, because once I told her I was from Philly, and I don't know if she always liked this, but her whole disposition was just like, it was just so raw and like just cool. Like, and you don't really get that from people within our community. Sometimes people get on their high horse and they could be cocky or Hollywood, but Milano was really just like down to earth. And she asked me, she was like, "You model?" And I was like, yo, stop playing. Like, I was looking a little sharp, you know what I'm saying? I got a fresh cut, made sure the fit was on point, kept a real light drip, you know what I'm saying? I got my shirt from Sheen, had some G-Star jeans on, those were my favorite jeans, Como des Garçons on the feet, then I had the Black is Love coat bag. I was feeling myself. I felt like I was looking a little sturdy, you know what I'm saying? I was looking all right. So, I mean, she was like, "Do you model?" And I'm like, yo, I was like, no, but I want to, and I do want to, because I've done a couple shoots here and there, and I want to make it more of a priority. I just been trying to get my body right. But I was like, nah, I want to. And she was like, reach out to this contact. She was like, you should model for my brand. She was like, where are you based? I said, Atlanta. She was like, bet. And she gave me the contact. And I'm just like, yo, stop playing. Like, why you? I'm really talking like this to her. I'm like, stop playing. And I felt comfortable enough to do it, because I'm always gonna be myself. And she was being so down to earth, and she was like, "No, I'm dead serious." She like, reach out. It's like, be respectful, of course, but you know, why not? And it was just dope to like get that type of opportunity. So like, man, it was just dope to be surrounded by so much love. Everybody was willing to help. I got a lot of "you are beautiful" throughout the weekend, so that made me feel good too. I don't know if it's the locks, I don't know if the freckles, I don't know if it's everything in between, but just walking around hearing that and just really embracing the love and support, it really was just a great experience and opportunity. My dog want to say something to y'all. Say what's up, Saint. Come on. You're messing up the pod, boy. Get up here. Say what's up, Saint. All right, go. Go, boy. Go. But anyways, y'all, that was my recap on InvestFest. As a piece of feedback, it's 3 things that I have. If people are going to pay $500 plus to come to an event, you could at least have water, bottles of water available, because it was hot in there and we was walking around a lot. You could definitely have light refreshments. I think it was cool that we all bought food, because we were supporting small businesses and black-owned businesses, which I think is great because we pouring money back into the community and it's creating an ecosystem of camaraderie and success and betterment for our community. But I do think they could have had light refreshments, whether it's wrap snacks or whatever it is, just for people to snack on during some of the opportunities and stuff like that, during some of the workshops and sessions. And lastly, I would say for the amount of people that was there, I heard last year it was 13,000. I didn't go last year. This was my first experience going to this year, it being 20,000 people. I think that there could have been more staff fostering people on where to go, how to find the different rooms, how to get to the different workshops and things like that. So those are the only things I would notice. This is only their third year, so of course there's always room for improvement. But shout out to the guys at Earn Your Leisure. I think they put on a spectacular show. Jeezy capped it off with an incredible performance, so I think it was love, man. It's not gonna be that many weekends or even experiences that you get like that where you're just surrounded by your people and so many great entrepreneurs and opportunities. So it was dope. In relation to the baby, we are currently on our 25th week. The baby is growing healthily. Everything is looking good. We saw what he looked like a little bit, so got to see his little face, which was so beautiful, just like his parents. And it just was exciting, man, like starting to like see what his features is looking like, his little nose, his little lips, his little cheeks, eyes, and etc. 1 second, y'all. Go see it. No. But yeah, it just made me happy, and like we just count down the days right now. We working toward the baby shower, and that's really going to be the icing on the cake for this experience in the days and weeks leading up. I just been trying to like mentally prepare myself, but also physically prepare myself as well. So like I've been in the gym, y'all. I don't know if y'all could tell. If y'all go back to prior videos of me, just look at my face, right? Just look at my face. My face was a little chubby. I had like more facial hair at the time, so you probably really couldn't tell, but my face is getting skinnier. I lost over 10 pounds, and I just been intermittent fasting. I've been taking my probiotics, drinking green tea, going to the gym in the morning, whether that's at 6, 7 a.m., going to the gym after work for 2 days. So in the mornings, I usually lift. After work, I probably will go and run some basketball, whether I run some ones, 5-on-5, just whatever to just stay active, because I want to look good in my baby shower fit. You know what I'm saying? And wifey, she doing her thing. She getting up, walking as much as she can, stretching, and making sure that she feeding the baby good food. So we've been working, man. This has been a delightful pregnancy. I'm learning a lot about myself, about her as a woman, and just about women while they're pregnant, man. It's been dope. I don't have no complaints. So if you was wondering, that's how the pregnancy's going. That's how I've been doing. That's how InvestFest was. I've also networked with some great people, man. Some people that I met in InvestFest and just some people that I met, period. So I'm really hoping to get them on the pod or just see if we can collaborate and create some content. So I'm back outside, y'all. We in a new crib. We settled in. It's been a long time coming, but I'm just ready to get back into the mix. And I know I always say this. I never left the mix, but just sometimes life happens. And because I don't have a team, I'm operating everything independently. Sometimes it can be hard to juggle life, but also make sure I'm doing all of the things that I would need to do to support this brand. So I'm learning. Y'all just bear with me and continue to support me. But that was all for me. It felt good to get back in the ring, spar again, and hopefully, I could keep cranking these videos out for y'all because I love doing this. So as always, man, I appreciate y'all. I hope that everybody found some type of value in this video. I hope everybody is doing well, aspiring for their personal endeavors. And let's just keep failing forward, y'all. So if you like this video, don't forget to leave a comment, like it, subscribe to the channel if you don't already. Feel free to leave a review if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And just share the podcast with a friend or somebody that you feel like could benefit from this, whether that be a coworker, somebody at church, anywhere. That's the challenge I give to y'all. But other than that, man, I really just want to say thank you. I'm grateful, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Love.
Conversations of NFTs and things. Investing all our dollars and hoping that freedom reigns. It's hard being us, but the talents cover the pain. Make it to the lead, but we still don't own the game. Way too many souls are tainted behind the fame. The parties in private mansions, they exchange some drinks. Corrupt the things you think. Your life changing a blanket and nothing seems the same. All these curses.